So if you can approve that, then we will move forward for Enneagram in Relationships Part 2 with Kelly. And as I shared last week, Kelly is a psychotherapist in private practice here in Colorado. His practice is called The Relationship Works, and that is also his website. So jot that down. It is a .net. Kelly has an MA in transpersonal counseling psychology from Naropa, which is right up in Boulder. He provides Enneagram informed counseling for couples and individuals needing support for relationship issues. I can give my own testimonial. I've worked with Kelly. Paul and I have worked with Kelly. He's good. And I like a therapist that gives you homework and that calls you on your stuff. And Kelly does that. So if you're looking to really use the Enneagram in a growth way, Kelly's a great resource. Just ending here with the little blurb that I had. Kelly believes understanding the strengths and challenges of each person based on Enneagram type, as well as typical points of conflict between the type combinations, can result in a more harmonious and intimate relationship. He integrates other approaches such as attachment style, mindfulness, biological approach to couples therapy and the Gottman method into understanding and healing relationship issues. So do write down Kelly's information, and when you need it, John, thank you. I will add you to my list. um, so about the meetup, I just remembered, I forgot to say that. So the Connecting You with Yourself meetup is completely gone as of today. And the IEA meetup will be dropping off. What's the day, Justin? August? Oops, you're still muted. He's coming. He's going to tell us that day. That day is, or put it in the chat. There he goes.
August
Now,
1st.
August 1st, so very soon. So you can stay on Meetup if you enjoy that, or if you were only on Meetup for these events, you can now get rid of Meetup and all the emails that they send you. So with that, I'm passing the baton to Kelly, and just thank you all for being here, and thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, thanks for showing up again tonight, everybody. So as Nancy said, we're going to be doing part 2. We had a lot of good discussion last week and didn't make it through all the types. So we're going to be finishing that tonight and hopefully have time for a breakout as well. So, but before we get to that, let's do some grounding. So if you feel comfortable, put your feet on the ground and close your eyes. Take a couple of nice deep breaths all the way down to your diaphragm. Allow yourself to arrive in the here and now. And we oftentimes have lots of stuff floating around in the head, lots of thoughts, almost always about the past or the future. So just notice what thoughts you're coming with, what you've been doing today, what you have to do later, tomorrow. Anything else that's swimming around in your head, just notice it right now. Be aware of it. And then see if you can gently release it. Set it aside for now. Those thoughts will always be there later. Now put some focus on your body. You might notice how it feels to be sitting in the chair. Likely your skin's warmer when it's in contact with the chair than your bare skin, exposed to the room air. And continue to have some focus on your breathing. Notice the rise and fall of your chest as you inhale and exhale. You might notice that the air temperature in your nostrils is cooler on the inhale than the exhale. And then just do a gentle scan through your body to see if you notice any other sensations occurring right now. Aches or pains, or pressure. And there's no need to push anything away. It's just about being aware. Check in with your thoughts one more time. See if you've wandered off to the past or the future. If so, see if you can come back to the present. Now to turn your attention to the heart area. The physical location in your body, but also your emotional state right now. Emotions typically are felt in the body. See if you can notice where in your body they might be showing up. Maybe your heart, maybe somewhere else. And sometimes emotions are big and bold, but sometimes they're very subtle. Unless you turn down the noise, you won't notice them. So see if you can notice any subtle emotions right now. And see if you can keep some connection to your state of presence, your emotions, your body, your breathing as you come back and turn your attention outward to the group. Open your eyes whenever you're ready. All right. Well, we're going to jump back into it. Share my screen here. Yeah, so the topic that we started talking about last week is the Enneagram in relationships and how you can use it to improve your relationships. And it's can be applied to romantic partnerships, but it also applies to friendships, anything else that anytime you're in a relationship. And of course, we're always always in relationship of some sort, including with ourselves, but also others. Um, and so I'm going to go back and just review one of the slides, the introductory slides from last week, just so we remember what we're talking about here. And I don't know if there's anybody new, but it's good to review, I think. So I'm talking about the Enneagram through the lens of love maps. And a love map is a way to understand both your and your partner's inner world. So it's kind of like an understanding. It's kind of like an owner's manual. It's what are their likes and dislikes? What are their triggers? What are their joys? What are their fears? Um, what tends to make them feel loved? All those things uh, are part of what John Gottman calls a love map. So I took this concept of a love map from John Gottman. He's one of the trainings I went through. He's a relationship, therapist and researcher, and applied it to the Enneagram. So that's how this came together. It's this concept of love maps, looking at each Enneagram type to see what each type, how they show up in life, in relationship. So we kind of broke this down to three different aspects of each Enneagram type. So that's triggers, defensive reactions, and glimmers. Uh, and so, as you might imagine, a trigger is anything that sets you off. It's upsetting communication or action that causes fear or anxiety. And I talked about limbic hijack a little bit last week, which is when your nervous system gets so aroused that your neocortex part of your brain goes offline and the limbic brain takes over. You start reacting out of your emotional state. So that would be a case of a trigger that's gone pretty far. And so we all have these triggers. It could be wounds from the past, could be trauma from the past, that something similar in the present uh, sets it off. It could be, if you're in a relationship, could be a fight that you've had, 50 times, and the person says the first sentence of the fight, and you kind of know the rest of it by heart, and so you're already off into the argument in your mind. That would be a case of a trigger as well. So we want to know how to deal with triggers and try to minimize those, and also help yourself and your partner get over them. So then the next thing we're going to be talking about is defensive reaction. So once we're triggered, we typically go into a defensive reaction, and that's a way to protect ego, protect our sense of self. Uh, and it turns out each Enneagram type tends to have a certain pattern of defensive reaction, and not always. Everybody's unique, and you could not be what we're going to talk about tonight, but oftentimes it is. And so we're going to be talking about that as well. A glimmer, which is, I kind of applied this term for this purpose, is a communication or action that helps you and your partner to feel seen, loved, secure, and appreciated. So it's kind of the opposite of a trigger. Your partner might do something that triggers you, but they could also do something that helps calm you down, helps you feel loved, help you feel accepted, help you feel like you're you have a sense of belonging. And so obviously, in a relationship, we don't want so many triggers, although they're going to come up. They always are. And we want to try to make sure that we add glimmers into the relationship so that both of you feel loved and appreciated. So if this is put all this together, and it's what we're calling a love map. What how you can understand yourself and your partner better. And that increases empathy because, if you really understand your partner, it's much easier to empathize with them. Put yourself in their place and see the world from their perspective. And that's a lot what we're going to be talking about tonight. So it's not so much just an intellectual understanding of what happens for a 6, 7, 8, 9. It's the idea is to put yourself in their place, empathize, imagine you're them, and we all have this capability to empathize, and so that you can really understand them at a deep level. And obviously for yourself too, but in relationship, we want to be able to do this with whoever we're relating to. And then usually a solution or connection or a resolution or a calming down happens when we're able to do that. So that's let me just pause there, see if there's any questions before we dive into, we're going to start with type 6 tonight. We went through 1 through 5 last time. Any questions or comments? We're going to have plenty of time. So last week we had a good discussion, and we're open to that again tonight. All right. So type 6, love map for type 6. So typically type 6 are very loyal people. They'll defend their partner or their friend. They'll stick with them through ups and downs. They'll go the extra mile for those people that they love to help them, protect them, whatever. So in that sense, they make a good partner. They're also great at anticipating potential problems because their outlook on life is kind of scanning for issues and problems in order to head them off. They're good at that. You might, something that if you're not a 6, something you might not really consider as a problem that might come up. A 6 could be looking further down the road than you and go, hey, this could happen, and I think this is a potential solution. So they're good at coming up with solutions as well. Yeah, the downside of that is the 6 can be prone to worry and overthinking. So if overthinking is thinking about all the different ways things might go wrong or could be a problem. And then if you spend too much time doing that, it's not healthy. You want to have a balance. Of course, we all want to plan. We all want to look ahead. We all want to make good choices, but you want to be able to come back to the present moment as well. So they can also question their partner's commitment or motives because sometimes their partner might not seem as committed as they are, or might have motives that are suspect. So that's another potential trait of a type 6. As I said, not everybody's going to have these, but some often they will. So triggers for a type 6. So this is things again that create some upset, some disconnection, so forth. Lack of consistency and congruency. So 6 like predictability. They like to know how things are going to go. They like routine to some extent. So anytime things don't seem quite right, there's somebody's not reacting in a consistent way, or what they're saying doesn't match what they're doing, or what they're doing doesn't match what they're saying, or what they said they'll do. All those things can be a trigger for a 6. Unexplained change, where their partner's making changes and they don't understand why, or a friend or whatever it is. They need to understand why things are changing in order to feel comfortable with change. Dishonesty and incompetence, because they're very loyal, straightforward people. They want honesty, and they want to be with somebody they know that can carry out whatever task you're trying to accomplish. So those things can be triggers. Being told not to worry is a trigger. Maybe they should worry less, but telling people not to worry never works. It usually makes it worse. So that's usually a trigger. Unfounded optimism. For me, I can remember when Donald Trump at the beginning of his term was saying there's only 10 cases of COVID in the US, but they're going to go away. Don't worry about it. It's going to fade away. That brought up my inner six, because I was like, that's 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 uh that's unfounded optimism. I don't believe that. So that unfounded optimism can make sixes and other people too worry more or feel more scared. So you want to make sure you're realistic if you're dealing with the six. So the defensive reactions, distrust if something seems out of whack or incongruent, would be suspicious, and that'll lead to anxiety. So, sixes can have an issue with anxiety when things don't seem quite right. If that continues, the insecurity can create arguments and aggressiveness for a six. May not be their first reaction, but as things escalate, because they don't feel safe, they don't feel comfortable, they can start getting argumentative. So those are all defensive reactions for a six. So what would help us six feel loved? What are the glimmers for a six? Consistent honesty, security, and support. And like all types of the Enneagram, we all like honesty, security, and support. Everybody wants that. But for sixes, it's a little higher priority. Yeah, so that's all this means. So that's something to focus on if you're with a six. Open communication and honest reassurance about their place in the relationship. So sixes might worry about, does you still love me, or are we still on track, or are we still together, or are we still, because they tend to worry. The reassurance is helpful. Yes, I love you. Yes, we're together. I want to be with you. You're my partner, whatever reassurance is needed. And open communication. It's not Pollyannish, it's just being direct, honest. And sixes appreciate that. They want to know where they stand. Take concerns seriously. So again, it's not being told not to worry. Listen to the concerns of a six, but you don't always just have to buy into it. You can provide alternative perspectives. So, every situation in life, there's different perspectives on it. And if you're a different Enneagram type, it can be helpful to say, that's one way to look at it, but here's another perspective. Here's another way to look at it that may not be quite so scary or fearful or anxiety provoking. So it's not discounting what they're feeling and what they're thinking about, but it's providing an alternative perspective. Okay, well, so I know, Anne, you're a six. Tracy is still there. You're a counterphobic six, I think, Tracy, which I'd be really interested in your perspective on this. So anybody have any comments, questions? Kelly?
Well, I mean, I can relate to a lot of this, and just very quickly, ever since I've been studying and working with the Enneagram and teaching a little, I've been a 7, and I've just been challenged on the 7 about 3 weeks ago. So I'm really exploring the counterphobic 6, and I can relate to a lot of this on here for sure.
Mhm.
For sure. And always like questioning and not feeling, always think there's a hair in the egg at times, like trying to create this thing that is not there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay.
Mhm.
Anne, did you have something?
No, well, what really rang true was the consistency and congruency. That's so important to me. I I I am trying to think of when I'm argumentative or aggressive. Yeah. So that one, I'm just interested and curious about that one.
Well, you may not be. This is kind of when probably when I was talking about the limbic hijack, when the arousal gets to a certain point, six can start getting argumentative and aggressive. But if you may not get to that point, it doesn't mean everybody does.
Oh, I do on political YouTubes.
Mm-hmm. Know that one.
What I've been told, and by many sixes, is when you think of the connecting lines to 9 and 3, when a 6 is triggered, there, because of the personality pattern of suspicion and the not trusting and the angst, they'll get defensive. So that's what that looks like, is they can check out at 9 or disassociate at 9, not listening, and just stay in that heels dug in defensive state. And what I've been told is, as they, breathe through it and come into all 3 centers of intelligence, then they see that they're not using their high mind, that they're, it's said that the 6th center of the head center in a forgetting state forgets their high mind and just gets into this, this argumentative state, this defense. It's a defense, but.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
So if that's helpful. But I'm really curious, because Sophia put it in the chat too. What changes in the love map for a counterphobic 6? Wonder if anybody has thoughts on that, Tracy.
Well, so again, I'm not as well versed on Enneagram as most of you, but
You're,
Tracy,
you went mute.
you muted. You muted.
sorry, I thought it came off. Well, good. I'll just start again.
Okay.
I was just simply saying I'm not as well versed as most of you on Enneagram, but I'm able to kind of look at myself backwards, like when I was a kid versus now, and my last relationship. I never really realized what triggers were, or really how to experience those and watch other people experience those, except for my last relationship. And so I can see as a child, I really did what you just said, Nancy, about that, because I had siblings, but it was kind of like I was the only child because of a big, vast age difference. And so I didn't know how to fight or communicate, and I would go internal when stuff got hard. But in my last relationship, I made it a point that I was like, I need to be communicating what it is I'm thinking and feeling. And my partner got triggered very easily. And I've never really experienced that in a partner before. But what showed up for me is I'd forget about high mind, and I would feed into his triggers sometimes. Not always, but I would become, because he would protect himself, and so he would be argumentative or disrespectful to me. I think he was a 5, and I would just I would fight. And granted, there's some of that to a counterphobic 6, right? I think there's that sort of, that's how strength might show up, is that you just won't give up, and you're just, you're going to just keep at it. And that's honestly, that, as you know, Nancy, when I went through the empowered living class, I thought I was an 8. And then as I explored and learned about counterphobic, I was like, oh, okay, that's definitely where I fall. Because I wouldn't say I've lived in fear most of my life, but that counterphobic of going forward, going towards things. And that's where I definitely can get aggressive. I like to say assertive, but some people would say aggressive, and definitely argumentative. I mean, I see that in my work sometimes, right? I'm problem solving for people, and then it just gets exhausting because I'm trying to explain, and so it sort of becomes a little, not argumentative, but it's not a good quality. Let's just put it that way. So, I mean, honestly, a lot of this I can relate to having been in love relationship. That's where I really see it. A lot of this for me. I don't know if that really helps highlight anything for anybody, but
Tracy, are the triggers for you, do these sort of fit, or are they different coming from a counterphobic perspective?
I'm not so sure. The lack of consistency and congruency, I think the unexplained change is more appropriate for me as counterphobic.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And definitely the dishonesty. I hate injustice, and I can't and I really struggle with the incompetence that comes up in my work all the time. Like, I'm just, you don't understand. I'm thinking to myself, I have to explain this over and over. So I don't do well with that. And the last one, not as much as I've gotten older, because that's where I sort of catch myself. I can see that ego is in play, and my brain is going way out there on something that could be in the future, and I have no control. So I'm able to sort of catch myself more on that. And that maybe that's just more wisdom of the ages. Maybe it's not. I just don't, I'm more anxious is more my place where I sit, as opposed to worry. I don't know if that's a slight difference, but that's really more what I feel attached to, is anxiety versus worry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna
Anybody
say,
else? Jessica, if you have anything to say?
in theory, it shouldn't be different for counterphobic. Just the reactivity should be different. But go ahead, Jessica.
Reactivity. Okay.
I was just gonna say, yeah, a lot of this resonates with me. I mean, one thing is the idea of like catastrophizing, like just thinking about things in the future and worried about outcome, or having anxiety about where like a relationship is going, or I think there's just I think as a 6 with a 5 wing, I can really get in my head about just like security and reassurance. But I was gonna say, in terms of anxiety, instead of being like argumentative or aggressive, I think I have a tendency to like not talk about something. So maybe this comes from like an unhealthier side of a 6, of wanting to just seek somebody's approval and not be difficult. And so instead of like expressing my anxiety or frustration or whatever it is, I just kind of hide it and pretend that things are okay. And maybe that's more of a phobic 6. I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Thanks. Riyadh, yes.
Yes, hello everyone. I had a couple comments or questions about this slide. I wondered, from a 6 perspective, what about consistent inconsistency? Because I can definitely see, or just, the optimism. How can we prove, when we're not a 6, how can we prove that optimism is founded on something? Because basically, I would say, as a former partner of a 6, I struggled so hard with reassurance. I felt totally incompetent at reassuring someone that definitely was just committed to distrust, was already triggered. And I'm like, I found it was very complicated. And we all know that types can match together more or less in harmony, but I feel that this particular part of being triggered and reassuring is particularly difficult for a 7 to reassure a 6, because I breathe hope, I breathe optimism, and sometimes I just can't tell where it comes from. And if you ask me to have a routine, it's just not possible. I will suffocate. And how can I reassure my 6, even if it's a friend or whoever loved one in my life, that I'm not trying to trigger them? That's my question.
Anne's got her hand raised there.
I'm wondering if doing the taking the concern seriously part and providing alternative perspectives, as opposed to saying, oh, it'll be okay, but oh yeah, I see what you mean. Well, what if this happens instead? Kind of proposing other scenarios, so without negating the 6's worry and concern, then they can do it for themselves. That's how my husband is with me.
Mhm.
I mean, it also boils down just to the base reality of everybody wants to be heard, right? It's just a function of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And taken seriously.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And in theory, 5s and 6s, they really need information and time to process.
Definitely time to process.
Yeah.
Although when does
Arlene.
my question also is like, when does it get to a point where you're wanting all this reassurance, and when does it become like an Enneagram thing and versus attachment style?
Great.
Yeah, Arlene, I see your hand. Let me just comment on that though. So it's if there's an insecure attachment, it can be a little bit like a cracked cup you're pouring, tea into. It never seems to be enough. And there's kind of a fine line between knowing your impact, that you're going to impact your partner or friend, whoever it is, and being responsible for them. And that's a nuance in relationship. So you can reassure somebody, tell them you love them, tell them you're here, but you can't change their fears or their suspicions or whatever it might be. That's their responsibility, those emotions. So it's knowing you have an impact but not taking necessarily responsibility for it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Arlene, do you have something?
Thank Anne for rephrasing, because I have one child, he's a counterphobic 6, and just as soon as I could see him, it's the posturing, and it just triggers me. And then I have the good luck of having an 8 partner, so he wants to be in control. So the 3 of us in the room, it's not possible. I back up and I'm going out. So I appreciate all these little nuances. And as a 2, I would love a glimmer from each of them, but it doesn't work. But you brought this all to my focus, Kelly, and I'm using it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Very ideal.
Oh, can I make Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I forgot to highlight the self-realizing prophecy part of the anxiety here, and that depending on partners and how we talked just earlier about attachment styles, how someone that is maybe a bit unsure of the future of the relationship, or maybe someone that is not that involved in the relationship, could react to someone consistently asking for reassurance. At some point you can just be tempted to follow this bad omen and be like, it's just too much, and maybe you're right, maybe we should just stop. And I think this part is the responsibility of the 6 to just at some point bring some measurements to the expression of their worries, not to not worry, but like being also conscious of the impact on their partner. Yes, self-fulfilling prophecy, exactly. Being conscious of the impact of their voice on the reality as well, because it can create a new reality the focus is always on negative parts. But maybe that's my 7 speaking, but I wanted to add that part.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Jessica, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I have a friend, and I dated somebody also that was a 7, and I think one thing was just communication in like just planning something out. I think we had very different ways to get to the same place, and so for me, I like planning in terms of maybe way far in advance that's necessary as a 6, and so there's been times where I was like, can you just let me know by this date? Or like, can we talk about it at this time so that we can at least create a plan together, and we can like, I think as long as there's some element of communication to get to that end result, then that's been helpful. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really good relationship skill, what you just said. Because it's moving toward trying to meet both needs, and compromising, which, a lot, if there's 2 different Enneagram types, you're going to have somewhat different needs, different styles, and so forth. So you need to talk about it and come up with a approach that accommodates both. So that's a good example. All right, anything else? Okay. Moving on to 7. So 7s are fun partners. They can be, they bring energy and spontaneity to the relationship. It's a 7 in a relationship with a 6 could have a conflict over what you just brought up, Jessica. You want to plan ahead and know what the agenda is for the weekend, and a 7 might say, wake up, let's just see what happens. I'll wake up Saturday morning and decide then. We'll see how I feel. So in which, that wouldn't necessarily work for you, Jessica. So sometimes they can have trouble committing to one person or settling down into a long-term relationship. That's probably a little bit lower functioning 7s. 7s that are more mature, probably not as much. And the 7s can struggle with emotions, particularly painful emotions. They don't want to feel them. They don't want to feel sad. They don't want to feel afraid. And so they'd rather just avoid them or do something else, do something fun to kind of put them on the back burner. And so, as sometimes that's great, particularly for a friendship or whatever, but if it's a long-term committed relationship, the negative emotions are going to come up, and they need to be dealt with. And so that can be a sore spot for 7s. So triggers, what I just said, having difficult conversations, talking about, upsets, pain, worry, fears, and really empathizing and being present for that kind of conversation. It could be hard for a 7. Partners expressing painful emotions or asking them to do so. So if this kind of the opposite of a 4. 4s can sit and listen to you, talk about your suffering for all day, and they'll be right there. 7 is just the opposite. Yeah, let's go play pickleball. I've had enough of this. Yeah, so that's a trigger. Boredom and routine. 7s like new adventures, new stimulation, doing things they haven't done before. So, if you've been in the same job for years and you have the same routine, you coming home to see your partner and cook dinner and watch TV, go to bed, that would drive a 7 nuts after a while. I see Marriott is reacting to that. So the defensive reaction, usually 7s can use a lot of rationalization. So rationalization is a thought pattern that avoids a certain experience. So you don't want to think about something because it creates a negative emotion. So let's just avoid thinking about it. Avoid pain, discomfort, guilt, anxiety. They don't want to take responsibility for that. They don't want to deal with it. Let's just smooth it over and move on. Glimmers, everybody likes to be appreciated for their strengths. So that's true of all the types. So a 7, appreciating them for their positive outlook and energy and ideas. Because that's the core of who they are, a core. And so appreciating that. Sometimes they need a counterbalance to what can become kind of frenetic energy or scattered energy. So being a calm, focused, grounding presence can be good. Not that you're stopping them from being adventurous, but you're just kind of being a counterbalance to that. Adapting to the need for flexibility and novelty. Yeah. So, and that's, again, unless you're with another 7, nobody's going to be exactly like you if you're a 7 in terms of the need for novelty and stimulation. But it's the more you can kind of accommodate that, the more they're going to feel loved and appreciated and comfortable. Were you going to say something, Nancy? Oh, I thought I saw your hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the type 7 love map. Marriott, do you have any comments? I don't know if we have any other 7s here. Kelly, yeah, you could be.
She lived as a 7 for a long time.
Okay.
She has strong 7 in her, I bet. Go ahead, Mary.
Kelly. Oh, okay. That really completely sits with me. Like the whole slide, it's impressive. Especially identifying and expressing emotions, and I think it's really the root of avoiding pain and everything. I feel like a baby with emotions, basically. So telling me to have an adult conversation about emotions is kind of completely outwardly. And I feel like it's not in my vocabulary, and it's not that I don't try. I just kind of confuse all of them, and I'm like, either you're happy, either you're not happy, and that's it. And if you're not happy, we're gonna fix it, because I want us to be happy all the time. That's why we're together. I don't know. And of course, it doesn't work that way. And for the triggers, I would say that one trigger that wasn't here, or maybe 2 triggers that are not in the slide for me. First trigger, I would say, is when I get critiqued for no reason. That really, really triggers me when I get a critique. No, I have a 6 wing, but maybe it has changed. Maybe it's more balanced now. I'm not sure. And the second thing that really drives me nuts is when someone takes me for granted.
Oh.
That's the core of everything. Because, for example, when I was dating my counterphobic girlfriend recently, she asked me for a routine, and I was going mad. I was like, I can't offer you that, baby. I can see you once a week, but that's my max. I can't see you every Sunday at 10. It's just not possible for me. Even if I try so hard, I need more space or more flexibility. So thankfully, we had 3 or 4 times in the week when we could meet each other. But otherwise, I couldn't. And I even refused to date someone at some point that was only available on Sundays. And I was like, what's that? I'm your Sunday treat? No, I can't. I just can't. It's not possible. You can't put me on a box and lock it with a key and put a stamp on it. And what's that? I'm not an object. I can't stand on your shell and wait and get dusty. And no, I'm alive. I need to move.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my intake.
Yeah. Is there, Marriott, is there any criticism in a particular area that sets you off more?
Maybe it turns around ungratefulness. It's really close to ungratefulness. I think it's balanced. It can be balanced with gratefulness, but just some lack of empathy, ironically, can drive me nuts when I'm probably one of the last empaths of the whole Enneagram. But when I don't feel emotionally secure, I go. That's really my core. I need to feel emotionally secure because I'm very, very sensitive. And this is probably why I avoid all of these things. And I know they exist underneath. And I think type 4s are impressive for that. You know what, when they share raw feelings, they put it out in the world, I feel so much more comfortable being myself. And it's been a year or two now that I discovered some poetry circles, and I feel at home there because there's no need to put a mask, and we can just dive directly into the deep stuff and peel our emotions, but there's a place for that. So I feel secure to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you brought that up because so many people
Yeah.
can think that 7s are not emotional and 7s have as many emotions as the rest of us. It's just the strategy
Mm-hmm.
around
No,
them. But
definitely.
sevens feel like all the others.
Yeah, and I would say the first layer that can help me open up emotionally is to feel safe. And safe means also physically safe because I move so much that I need to know I can be totally grounded here and now. And if I can anchor now with you in a safe place, physically safe, and then I can open up emotionally, be safe, and then let's see where it leads us. But there are layers for that.
Did that answer your question, Jan? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Annette,
want it because my mother-in-law is a 7. She is like, I think like 300% 7. And I wanted to know because I've been listening to you very carefully and soaking it in. I want to know like what makes her feel safe and secure because I can feel that she doesn't, and she has it deep inside of her, but she's very uncomfortable of expressing it or sharing it with most people. And she like to avoid everything that's not happy and pleasant and exciting. It's always very, very much on and a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, and a lot of activity, which is great, but I know that she, there's more to her than what it appears to be on the surface.
Yeah.
But obviously, like you said, you have to feel there's a safe space for you, to share that. And I was wondering, like, what would make a 7 feel safe and a good sense of belonging, like, that you can trust others.
Yeah, I
know-
think, let me
Go
just
ahead.
respond to that.
Yeah.
So I think one strategy, well, first I'll say that, 7s, like Nancy said, they have emotions just like everyone else. It's just that they have a harder time acknowledging, dealing with them sometimes and processing them. And so that if you notice that in your, I think you said your mother-in-law, yeah, it's, especially as you get older, if you haven't dealt with that, it's kind of like this weight that keeps building and building. And so it's harder to maintain that facade of happy and fun loving and so forth, because that it's kind of like an anchor that starts weighing you down. So as 7s get older, they either have to evolve to be able to deal with that, or they can end up fairly unhappy because they haven't. So
Yeah, and very depressed with a big facade.
yeah.
I was going to say Kelly was going to share, and then Sophia has her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that, like putting on the happy face for lots of years. And when the 7s, when we start to do our work and dive in and can actually feel the depths of the sadness that's really underneath a lot of it, it's powerful. And like everyone doesn't do it, right? It's like people get to a certain point and then either they want to continue to grow or they don't grow. But this part also of like the boredom and the routine. Oh, like, yeah, I mean, for me in relationships, like if you want to, I let one really lovely 9 go because he just wanted to sit and watch TV every day after work and have the same like routine and eat the same.
You get married.
What? What did you say, Jan?
No, I was looking at Mary as a expression on her face. She's-
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, and and also like this being a calm, focused, grounding presence, like I also realized why I've been very attracted to nines. Like I feel like I know nines better than I know myself, because obviously I'm questioning my type now. And that grounding presence that a nine holds for sevens that are so like all over the board and popcorn and pinball machine brain, it's very so it's calming. It's a calming presence that is
Yeah,
so that we're
grounding.
able to slow down a little bit too, right? Like, yeah, as an assertive type and then a withdrawn type, it's yeah, it's fun to watch the polarity go back and forth.
Mhm.
Sophia.
Sophia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to share my experience. I have a lot of experience with a partner who was a 7. And I found, talking about this 9s and 7s thing. I definitely think that, being calmed was really helpful in terms of making them feel safe in things. But one place where that combination can really get into trouble is I could sense they did not want to have a difficult conversation. And in wanting to pursue my motivations of not wanting to get in the way of anyone else's agenda, you kind of get stuck in this place of, well, you don't want to have this difficult conversation. Let me figure out how we don't have to have it so I don't trouble you. And, after like a decade, that really doesn't work. So then difficult conversations had to happen, and I discovered what works and what doesn't. And one thing that does not work is saying, well, there's a difficult conversation I have to have. How about tomorrow at 5 p.m.? That was probably the worst thing I could say. So it was like much better to be spontaneous and spring it on them. And then I found that originally I was trying to appeal to their head center because they're such a head center person. Like that's just always what's kind of surrounding them. But when I approach difficult conversations in a head center type way, well, that's when the rationalization comes and the pushing away. Like there were just the mental gymnastics to get out of that, of like, oh, that's not really a problem because was really, really hard to deal with. And eventually they just told me, appeal to my heart. That's it. So that having a difficult conversation, I would just start with, I'm in pain, and just let it sit. And one of the things I've heard Russ Hudson say about people who, types that are like, right on the line between two centers, is that they will take, as they become more and more unhealthy, they'll start with, in this case, the 7, the head center, and then they'll recruit the center that's right next to it. In the case of a 7, it's the body center to help feed the head center desires. And so if you want a way in, appealing to that 3rd center, and in this case being the heart, just cut right through and made the difficult conversations so much like we weren't fighting anymore. It was a mutual, let's try and solve this. Because the moment I said I'm in pain, they're like, oh my God, let me help with that. That is the opposite of what I want. And suddenly it was a much easier conversation for everyone. So I don't know if that's just my 7 or all 7s, but just in case you're struggling to have a difficult conversation, that's what I found to work.
Very good.
Wow.
I'll
Yeah, the
second
other-
that. I'll second that. Was married to a 7 for 20 years, and absolutely everything Sophia said. Definitely.
The other thing I'd say, Jan, is that with the 7, if you can kind of lead the way in vulnerability, particularly about emotions, not necessarily pressure them to respond right away, but just show the way, show an example, and it'll, yeah, a light bulb might come on, and they start to dip their toe into that if somebody else is doing it.
Thank you.
Myriad, yeah.
If I could add a last comment, I would say that there is an honest mistake from my part as a 7 to assume that if I am happy and if I take charge of my own emotions, everyone else around will do the same. So I just believe that if others are not okay, they're gonna tell me. And I don't go towards others to say, hey, are you okay or not? Because I'm like, no, I'm okay. I deal with my emotions. So do them. And I believe it's a honest mistake. In some part, maybe I could go out of my way and ask more regularly how people are feeling. But then I feel like I'm going to open Pandora's box. And if everyone is already, let's say, okay, that's enough for me. I feel like if I ask them to open that box all the time, of course they're gonna find things and say, oh, actually I'm not that okay. Let's talk about this or that or that. And I feel it's gonna get in the way instead of just honestly waiting for them to tell me what's important, what matters. To me, it's a matter of trust. I feel that if others are responsible for their emotions and if they trust me enough, they're going to come to me, as Sophia said, and tell me, oh, I'm in pain. And I was like, oh, gosh, of course, you have all my attention now. But if you don't tell me, I won't see it. And it's not because I don't pay attention. I just assume you're okay if you don't tell me you're not okay. I don't know if that helps.
Thanks for that. Okay, well, let's move on to the type 8. Justin, I know you're a type 8. I don't know if anybody else is here. Type 8 can be intensely loving and protective partners. It's kind of like if you're in their circle, in their zone of protection, responsibility, whatever it is, they got your back. They're gonna be there for you and protect you. Typically, they're not highly physically affectionate and doting. And that can be, if they're with the 2 or something like that needs more of that can be a point of conflict. But that's not always the case, but sometimes it is. Blunt communication, 4s just, H just say it like it is. They're very direct. They don't sugarcoat things typically. And if there's pushback or a difference opinion, they can be argumentative. They can defend their position pretty strongly. So that can be sometimes an issue in relationship with an 8. So triggers for an 8, betrayal or disloyalty. So like I said, if you're in the tent, you're loyal, you're doing what you say you're going to do, they got you back. If you're not, if there's some disloyalty or lying or whatever, that can really set them off. It can be a trigger. The 8s can struggle with vulnerability when faced with emotional situations or conversations. They want to kind of maintain that tough, I'm in charge persona. And so if they're feeling particularly the more, difficult emotions of sadness, fear, whatever, that can be hard for them to accept and be able to talk about. And feeling disrespected, dismissed, or ignored. And again, nobody likes that, but 8s really want to feel like they're a little bit the center of things. Everybody's paying attention. If you're not paying attention to them, discounting them and so forth, that can be a trigger as well. So the defensive reaction can start with denial, like I just don't want to deal with it. These people don't really challenge me, or they don't really disagree with me, or whatever it might be. They'll just keep pushing. But if there's significant conflict, they can erupt in anger and become confrontational. Like I said, they're not the type to quietly negotiate a difference. They're typically going to be more confrontational. So glimmers, if you're in a relationship with an 8, be straightforward and honest. That's what they are, and that's what they appreciate. They don't want to beat around the bush. They don't want to hem and haw. They just want to get to the point. Be loyal and supportive, particularly in front of others, because this is 8. If you embarrass an 8 in public or in front of other people, that's going to be a trigger. It's going to be particularly difficult for them. And be loyal and supportive to the extent you can. Of course, everybody needs to have their own opinions, and they need to have their own boundaries and so forth. But that's something that they appreciate if they're feeling triggered. Is to, yes, I'm on your side. I get it. We're a team. Let me support you, whatever it might be, so they know that you're inside the tent. Provide emotional space and respect for their independence. So 8s tend to be fairly independent. They can take care of themselves to a large extent. Sometimes they need space in order to just kind of be in their own energy and take care of themselves. Ideally, they come back and connect, at times and have an emotional connection, emotional intimacy, but they're not going to be able to do that 24/7. They're going to need their own space. And you can also, create safe space for vulnerability. So like I just said to Jan, you might lead with that, being a little vulnerable, then be quiet and ask them questions. Don't be judgmental. Just kind of coax that out. The softer things that they might have a little bit of embarrassment or guilt or shame about. So there you go. That's what I have for an 8. So any comments on that?
That's pretty well right on.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly see all of these in myself, or in the past in myself. Doing intensive psychotherapy certainly changed some perspectives. You don't want to put down an 8 in public. That's betrayal, disloyalty, and that's going to basically bring up lots of anger. Anger is an issue with an 8. I know that when I get angry, where it says down below, create safe space for vulnerability and emotions, that's true. One of the things I want to do when I get angry, because I need to process it, is to be on my own. I go into my cave.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to don't go into the cave. If you're in a relationship with an 8, don't go in the cave and poke the bear.
Man.
So, but I don't spend a lot of time there. I process what I need to process and move on. Definitely, I can be very intensive, loving. My wife is a 2. So where it says, you mentioned that earlier, Kelly, about if you happen to be with a 2, where it says won't be overly affectionate and doting. Well, when I knew my wife was a 2 before I married her, so I realized a few things. Knowing the Enneagram definitely helped me and continues to help me with the relationship, because 1, I don't like other people to help me. Okay, that's pride. But I realized that as a 2, I need to let the 2 help. I need to allow that, because that gives her lots of energy. So I have to allow the 2 to help, which I do. And when she does help, I go out of my way to show that I'm very appreciative of all of the things that she does for me. So I acknowledge what she does, like, thank you for making dinner. It was really good. I really appreciate that. That type of thing. And I always do that. Again, when I was younger, I would not have done that. But now that I'm older and more mature, I definitely do that. Definitely can be argumentative. I like to argue. Um, yeah, I know, Arlene, you're married to an 8, so you understand that. Although lately, though, over the last few months, I've decided that I'm really going to stop doing that. Yeah, it is a sport, Kelly, for an 8. I decided to walk away from that as much as I could, especially with the politics that go on today, like on Facebook. All I do now on Facebook is happy birthday, happy anniversary, I'm sorry for your loss. That's about it. I don't say anything else. A couple of years ago, people started to threaten me personally because they didn't like what I was saying. So what? I don't care.
Mhm.
So let's see what else here. Kelly, do you have questions on this?
I appreciate what you said, Justin, about you and your wife who's a 2, because that's a great example of a couple in long-term relationship moving toward each other and accommodating each other.
Right.
And the result is personal growth, because it's not easy for an 8 to say I need help or accept help. But it's good for you to not be an island, to be able to be in connection with others. And for your wife, she needs to be able to help. And she's probably also deals with being self-reliant somewhat, because you're self-reliant. She has to be a little bit more.
Yes, we are both self-reliant. She makes her own decisions, and I make my own decisions. I like that. I like being with a strong partner because I'm strong, and I really have enough problems managing my own life. I really don't need to manage somebody else's. So she does make her own decisions, and what decisions she makes, I support her in those decisions.
Yeah, right. So that's how your differing Enneagram types actually promoted personal growth for both of you.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah.
Jessica?
I had a question. This is more just in relationships, maybe more family than romantic, but how would, like, if a young person, let's just say like an 8 who's under 10, or an 8 who's older that maybe needs some assistance, like what's the best way to like help them without there being like some kind of frustration with like offering help? Does that make sense? Like is it just like, can I help you do this, or is there another way that is better to communicate that I'm like here to help with, whether it's like something that needs to kind of happen quickly, or yeah, I just think sometimes I fall into, there's like a stubbornness or like a frustration that they can like do it on their own, and I think I want to like help, but I get some pushback.
I don't know, Justin, what would you say?
Well, let's see. You are a 6. It's an interesting relationship. You're not counterphobic, are you?
No, I think I'm phobic.
Okay. 6s and 8s tend to get along pretty well. I've got a really good friend who's a 6. I don't know how else to say that. I do know what triggers it, and I stay away from those triggers. Now, and I guess he knows what triggers me, so he stays away from my triggers too. Although he does not know the Enneagram as well as I do, so I'm very sensitive about how he reacts and how he feels to things. I always like to reassure him.
I can add in a little bit. My oldest daughter is a type 8. And I also wonder about the difference in gender at 8, and the fact that she was raised by a type 2 mom. but she, in difference to what Justin shared, she's very affectionate and still is very affectionate. And as a child, she was in need of a lot of touching, a lot of holding. And when I came into the Enneagram, it was so good because I would be afraid of the anger. She had the anger, the aggression, and I was like afraid she was going to hit me. She's bigger than me. You know, when she was like in 6th grade, she towered over me. And one of my first Enneagram teachers said, is to put my hand on her shoulder or on her hand and just say, I'm here for you. Tell me, because they want control. Tell me what you need. Tell me, not necessarily how I can help you, because that was a triggering word, but tell me, you know, what you need from me. It was the verbiage, the spinning of the verbiage was so important to let them feel their power. That was so important, that she felt empowered, that I was on her side, I was on her team, as Kelly highlighted, you know, that I was there and I was going to support her. And the touch was magical. It shocked me. And I wonder, Justin, do you have that with touch, that if somebody touches you, I'm assuming somebody that you trust, not just strangers walking down the street, but in a moment, you know, when Alice touches you, does that help to?
Yes, yes, I do. Well, I am instinctual. The 8, 9s, and 1s are instinctual, and I'm body oriented. So yes, I do like touch. I'm well connected and grounded with my body, and I am very affectionate. You
Yeah.
mentioned that earlier with your daughter.
Yeah, she really is, and she's very affectionate with her partner, and very, very protective. And also she, you know, the hard part for her partner is the anger.
Yeah.
Her partner identifies 2, 3, and we have many conversations about, you know, the anger. It's to not take it as an attack. We call it passion. We try to rename it. It's not anger, it's passion.
Yeah, that's what my wife has a problem with, is with my anger. What I do is I usually avoid now. I try to avoid the confrontation. In the past, I wouldn't. So I mentioned it earlier. I withdraw. I go into my cave. I'm alone. I go do something by myself in order to. Yeah, that's correct. That's right. In order to think it through, because I learned a long time ago, rather than just react, at least give yourself a count of 10 to think it through.
Yeah, it's also 9. It's going to
Correct.
the 9 of stepping back, and the 5 of detaching. Yeah.
It's my wing is a 9.
Yeah.
And I'm also self-preservation. So that kind of makes me a loner.
So, Jessica, that was all great. I think the only thing I would add is probably don't say, "Do you need help?"
That's what that's always gotten me in trouble.
Yeah, that's what I said. Don't ask that.
I would say something like, "How can I support you?" or "How can I get behind your plan?" or something like that.
I like Justin, when you said self-preservation, because it's like, okay, if that's the value, to like self-preservation, then it's like, how can I help you? Like how me being here, or like what, like you said it, Nancy, it was like like do you need help? You said it like, in where like
it's what do you want me to do for you?
What do you want me to do for you?
Yeah, it's empowering them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So just reframing it so that it's better received, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And a quick question, how, yeah, anyway, thanks for helping me to really understand with 8 about the argument and the confrontation and how an 8 views that as an expression of their passion. How can, when we interact with an 8, is there a way to, I wouldn't say avoid, probably is a bad word, to avoid arguments, or in order to have a productive communication, you know, in order to, for the use of our time and energy to be contributing of resolving conflicts, or, you know, being productive use of the time and energy instead of, you know, arguing, tend to can not necessarily be productive, right? To resolve things. What would be a effective way of communication with an 8, instead of getting to arguing? What would
Well,
be a good advice?
you want to be blunt to the point. Don't beat around the bush and don't make the story too long. Go to the executive summary. If I want more information, I'll ask. But I'd rather have you give me the punchline, the bottom line first, and then we can go from there.
Okay.
In
But
in
what
my
if I offer the bottom line and then they're arguing, attacking the bottom line?
Well,
Not
would that be,
accepting it, not accepting it, you know?
that could be. That can happen.
Yes.
You then have a choice. You can increase the intensity of the conversation, or try to sit back, give yourself a little time, and then approach it after the anger has subsided.
Okay. Okay.
The other thing that, Jan, I think you might try is, you know, 8s really want to know that they're heard, that you get them, you get their perspective. So you like reflective listening instead of jumping into your opinion, kind of paraphrase back what they said and like, okay, I get you, I understand you. I think we'll turn the temperature down some.
Okay.
One thing you want to remember, Jan, that the 8 has a very hard crust on the exterior, but we're like the Pillsbury Doughboy inside. And if you can get through that hard exterior and build trust with that 8, he or she would open up much more and be very frank and honest with you.
Okay.
I see myriad too, but I also am very careful because sometimes I think there's a problem and my daughter will go, I was just mad. Like there's not a problem.
Being mad is a problem to us, to me.
Yes, yes. And so
I
it's
don't like
checking
people to
in.
be mad.
It's checking in, just going, we're good. It's, and of course my daughter has a strong 7 wing. So maybe it's going to what Myriad shared earlier, you know, the 7 influence mixed with the 8 and then a female. But go ahead, Myriad.
Yes, I wanted to talk about my lovely 8s that I love so much, close ones, loved ones, friends. My daughter is an 8 as well. And I don't fear their anger, actually. I just embrace it. I go through it with them. And I use their 2 arrows. I use the fact that I love them. And it's the first thing I say, because for me, the antidote to anger is love. First thing, first, is I love you. And then I say, I also understand you. You're right to be mad. You have a right to be mad. I embrace what is coming up for them. And I don't mix anger with just a burst of energy. I feel like some energy is blocked because a limit has been crossed, a need hasn't been met. And I'm like, okay, dear, I love you, I get what you're going through, and let's kick that ass, let's go all the way. Let's see what's bothering you. And if, for example, someone is going to conflict, they're going to beat up someone, or they're going to shout, or they're going to maybe break something, that's when I intervene and I'm like, you know what? You're smarter than that. Just breathe a little bit, stop there, and see if it's really worth it. Think of the consequences. I get that right now you're super angry at this and that and that, and you're right to be angry, but you're smarter than that. You want to sit down a bit, you want to just breathe, and we talk more about it before you act. And sometimes it's just enough. Sometimes it's just enough that they're not alone with that. And I talked with my daughter about, when she struggled with something and she's super mad. And she told me, never, never, never pity me. Never. Never think I'm not capable of fixing my own things. And that really helped me, actually. Because that's very different if I say, oh, you lost, you have a problem, can I help you? It's very belittling. And if instead I say, okay, dear, like, what's going on? Oh, okay, you got it. I know you got it. You can make it. Let's just find ways. That's very different. That's very empowering. If that makes sense. Yeah.
All right, thanks. All right, let's move on. Last but not least is the type 9. So in relationship, type 9s are known for being really supportive, easygoing, patient, intuitive listeners. Usually good at listening, good at understanding, good at being supportive. They're quick to forgive because they don't like conflict. They don't want to be in disharmony. So they want to seek harmony. If there's a hurt, they may not express it, because sometimes they might suppress the hurt, but ideally they'll say what's going on for them, what they're feeling. But then they'll want to come back into harmony pretty quickly after that. They're not the type to hold a grudge for a long time. As I said, they tend to be conflict avoidant. That feels very uncomfortable for them. But as for all of us, emotions don't just go away. They get suppressed or they come out in some other way. And so that can be passive aggressive behavior instead of direct communication. You'll find that they're sabotaging something, or something isn't quite working right. They've thrown a monkey wrench into whatever it is, rather than just saying directly what they're upset about. So triggers, conflict and confrontation. Obviously, that's very difficult for 9s to deal with. At least mid to lower functioning. I'm sure there's higher functioning 9s. That's not as much of an issue. They're also, because they kind of have a tendency to fade into the background a little bit in some situations. That's very difficult. That's difficult for them to be overlooked, ignored, left out, cut off. They're not necessarily going to speak up and say, hey, you're ignoring me, I want attention, but it's still going to be difficult for them. They're going to feel hurt by that. Needs being dismissed, because 9s have a hard time saying what they need to begin with. If they get up the courage to say, I need you to go to a wedding with me, or need whatever it might be. If you dismiss it or don't take it seriously, that's going to be a trigger. Defensive reactions, withdrawal, because they don't like confrontation. Their first knee-jerk reaction is just back off, and it's not necessarily they're going to get mad and huff off. They'll just kind of fade away. You'll find them back in their room, or they're not engaged anymore. Narcotization, that's a defense mechanism. That means numbing out, kind of, because they can't deal with the conflict, the intense emotions. They'll have this ability to kind of numb the emotions out, go into denial somewhat about the emotions. And as I said, passive aggressive behavior, because they'll want to, if the negative emotions are not going to go away, so they'll come back and can use passive aggressive behavior to kind of indirectly express them. Glimmers, ask them for what they want and need, and be patient for a response, because they have a hard time identifying what they need. They're not, if you just say, hey, what do you need, they're not going to say A, B, C, D, these are the things I need. So you got to be patient and let them think about it and come back and ask later, things like that. Give them your full attention, because that's they can be used to kind of being dismissed a little bit, not feeling important. So really, when you're with them, really focus, ask questions, listen to them well. They're going to listen well too. Seek input on decisions, because it's easy with a 9 to just start making all the decisions because they're just okay with whatever. But that's not necessarily good for them, and it's not good for you either. So ask for their input and maybe give alternatives and say, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? Seek their input, and find activities you both enjoy doing together. They'll tend to adapt to you, what you want to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's something that they truly want to do. So you really have to explore what works for both of you, what they enjoy doing, what you like, and then find common ground there. Yeah, so I'm sure there's some other triggers and glimmers for 9s, but that's what I have here. And John, you're a 9, and we got some other ones, I think, too. Any comments or questions?
Rosemary and Sophia.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good description of 9s, and I'll get to some more, maybe a little different things at some point. But yeah, I think that makes good sense to me in my experience. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of this rings very true. If I'm gonna add to it, one thing is with the glimmers, it's also been a glimmer for me because one of my blind spots is what I'm bringing to the situation. I don't realize that I'm having a positive effect. So when my loved ones have said, like, when you show up, it's great because, and really give me a concrete reason, then when I'm sitting there thinking, oh, maybe if I just don't go to this party, no one will notice and it won't make a difference. It's like that thing will come back up. No, last time you went to the party, that one person said you made a big difference by doing X, Y, and Z. So I would probably add that. I would also say that the trigger of being overlooked, ignored, like I cannot state that heavily enough. That is the thing that will hurt me the most by a long mile.
Hmm.
And when that happens, I'm often, like, especially before I knew the Enneagram, I would say that, oh, you're ignoring me because what I have to say isn't interesting. You're ignoring me because you're more important. Like, I would actually buy into that. And so that further was making me feel like, well, I just shouldn't show up at all. So yeah, I would definitely, that's so hits home. And then the other thing I would say is may avoid conflict and resort to passive aggressive behavior. I'm aware that a lot of my passive aggressive behavior I was not conscious of. I did not know that I was doing that. But I will also say that the majority of the time I was avoiding conflict, it didn't necessarily make me resort to passive aggressive behavior. Most of the time, like 55, 60% of the time, I would like disengage to stop it from hurting me. So I might be aware that the conflict's bubbling up inside me, or I might not. But either way, it's like, a frequent thing that would happen is, this has really pissed me off, but this isn't a good time to bring it up because they're struggling at work right now. So right now I can just handle this and be fine. And like the only way to be fine was to disengage, to be like, I'm present in the room, but I'm not really present in the room.
Mm.
And that was the result of me avoiding conflict, because otherwise you just can't handle it. So you have to disengage to a certain extent. And so like if you see a 9 that you love disengaging, like really lean in. Is there anything I could do that would make you feel better? And then they don't necessarily have to bring it up like it's conflict. Then it just feels like you're having a nice conversation. It's like the opposite of what we were just saying with the 8, like make it sound like you want to help me rather than sound like you want me to bring up conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Sophia, what you were describing, would you call that narcotization, where you just don't want to deal with it, so you kind of smooth it over, or is it something different?
it's definitely related. It feels like you just don't want to talk about it right now. You don't want to, you want it to just force it to be okay. And in the forcing it to be okay, you have to kind of lean on narcotization, because otherwise the equation doesn't line up. Like the only way you can force it to be okay without having the conflict is to try and numb it out to some extent.
Yeah.
Although, you know, at first you can probably put it to the side and just go on with your merry life without necessarily having to narcotize that much. But the more it gets, the more resentment is built, the more you have to numb out and withdraw.
Makes sense.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I have a kind of some interesting twists on 9s. While I have always avoided conflict, eventually I was kind of, needless conflict, certainly. There's a certain point, though, where you have to step in. And I was going back to getting my degree and becoming a teacher. And I was so intrigued by conflict resolution and mediation that I actually took a course that cost money to learn about mediation and conflict resolution. And I still have the book, The Magic of Conflict. And I think it's good as a 9 because you're patient, intuitive, and supportive. But then you also, conflict is inevitable. It's all around. But if you can make some sort of a good effort of it, you can actually do something that works for people. And that was very attractive. And I didn't actually ever practice mediation. I went to a group of almost everybody else was actually an active mediator for a year and a half. And some of them had wrote the handbook of Colorado family law, and they were in religious or different things. And they were like some of the most wonderful people I've ever been around. So it's like, okay, I do kind of like want to avoid needless conflict, but then there is a point where if you can make it out of not needless, but actually productive, or you just have to stand up. And it's like, there's times I will do that. But so it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. It's a little different take on it, but I think it's kind of fun being a 9. So
Yeah.
I
Well, it
don't
sounds
know.
like you're growing within being a 9, so which is good, good for all of us. That's what we want.
yeah, it helped to be a elementary teacher for 16 years, and before that a waiter. Conflict. I actually liked it when people complained, because I will make you happy, and I'd ask them, what will make you happy? Most of the time they didn't even know, so I'd have suggestions ready. But it was like, I don't know, it just is a weird little quirk of me or something. But to actually take something good out of conflict, now of course, really mean, mad people I don't want to mess with.
It
But
makes
anyway,
me
it's
it
fun.
makes me think so. My younger daughter is a type 9 with a strong one wing. And it's this balance between inaction and action. And then the 9 uses that. And when you were saying using the conflict, so she just did this weekend, and her husband, who identifies at 3 but hasn't really dived into the Enneagram. I don't know what his type is, but he's saying it was driving him crazy because she is very relaxed about her house and about things, and she invited all these people over the house. So the weekend was this crazy, like everything needs to get done. Things need to be painted, light fixtures need to be put up, laundry needs to be done, like dishwasher, like all the stuff. She used that. And I said, oh, she's just using this tension to get things done, this balance between inaction and action. I see Sophia shaking her head. Do you guys relate to that as a 9? That you use, like you can use the conflict as a motivator?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's the conflict, but like because 9s are in the body triad, we feel the impulse to do things. We can go into a state of like needing to get things done. And like when I'm in that state, I'm just like a little tornado that goes
Yeah,
around.
whirlwind. Yeah.
Yeah. It's getting into a state that does that. And the growth path for the 9 is like, how do you connect up that state of being able to do so much to your actual will and your actual, calling in life?
Yeah. Thank you. Helen had something to share, and Elliot just put in the chat about NVC.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Helen. Helen, are you there? Got her hand up.
Yes, I'm here.
There you go. Okay, good.
Yeah, I know. Technology. I'm not a 9, but I always thought I had really strong 9 tendencies and 9 qualities. For a while there, I thought I might be a 9. And I'm looking at this thing you're going and going, yeah, all of that's me. So I just think it's really accurate. Even if I'm not a 9, I'm actually a 4. But again, I look at the way they're on the circle, and 9 and 4 are opposite ends. They balance each other nicely. So there you go. And what you just said, Nancy, about balancing your action with your inaction, I'd never heard that before. And I think sometimes I want to do that too, where you kind of, you need to do that. Especially when I've got 50 things I need to get done. It's like, I can't do 50 at once. So let's just sit here, figure out which ones are the most important, and then we'll go do them.
I think
But yeah, balancing action with inaction. Sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
I was going to say that, a lot of children, if they're coming from a family where they were kind of neglected or weren't seen as important or weren't listened to, can take on some of these qualities, not necessarily because they're Enneagram type, just because of their upbringing, or it might contribute to them being a 9. But some of this stuff is as a result of kids that were neglected as well.
Ooh, neglect. Yeah, I can see being neglected causing some of these behaviors.
Yeah. Okay. So we ran out of time. I have one other slide. I'll just go over quickly. This was kind of a wrap up of some other considerations. Partners outside of your triad may seem more foreign to you and require somewhat more effort to understand and empathize with, because they're just going to be, their priority is going to be more different than somebody in your triad generally. But this actually can bring more balance to the relationship, to be in a relationship with somebody outside your triad. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. We mentioned instinctual subtypes a couple times. That has an impact as well. Can exaggerate some of these tendencies and suppress others. And so just coming back full circle, the Enneagram isn't everything that impacts relationships. There's lots of other things that do. And some of the more severe ones are addictions, mental illness, unresolved trauma, brain injuries. All these things can cause dysfunction that doesn't have anything to do with the Enneagram type, but make relationships difficult. So always have to, consider that as well. And the last thing there is that, the relationships, it used to be that, a successful relationship is be married for 50 or 75 years. I stuck it out. I didn't get a divorce. In today's day and age, that's not really the definition of success. Not all relationships, no relationships really last forever, even if it's ended by death. So it's not a failure for a relationship to end. For me, the real definition of a successful relationship is learning. And if you're learning and growing and healing and pursuing personal growth, that's a good relationship. Doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean it's smooth. But if both partners particularly are dedicated to this personal growth and healing, that's really the greatest benefit of relationships. So with that, I'm done. So I don't think we have time for a breakout, Nancy.
We don't, darn it. But I think the conversation was incredibly rich, and that's the most important part. So we have 2 minutes. Anybody that didn't get to say anything, you want Rosemary, did you share?
I think everybody chimed in with things that basically filled in what I was going to say. Except I think the passive aggressive stuff is, I kind of do it to myself.
Yeah.
Like I eat my negativity. I eat my emotions.
Yeah.
And one of the nicest compliments anybody ever gave me, as far as a glimmer, was I was a day late getting up the coast of California to their place in San Francisco. And when I did get there the next day, she said, I don't think you realize how disappointing it is not to be able to spend time with you. And I thought, that's the sweetest thing anybody's ever said to me.
Yeah.
Wow.
You guys have a real innate grounding energy.
Yeah.
For the rest of us. All right, I'm going to turn this recording